Welcome, everybody, to another brand new episode of It's My Wrestling Podcast. I'm, of course, as always, your host, Chris Dees. Before I get started, please make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube, or the follow button on whichever audio platforms you might be listening on. Today's episode, a bit different. I've brought in my very good friend once again, can't get rid of the guy, Mr. Mike Nunn, and we've gathered today to have a little bit of a chat about NXT 2.0, the new fandangle, the new revamped WWE NXT product. It's been going for a month now. We've had 5 episodes. This is being recorded on Wednesday the 13th, going to be released on Wednesday the 20th, so there will be another episode obviously yesterday by the time you're listening to this, which we obviously won't be covering, but I think that's the only episode between now and Halloween Havoc, so there might be some things that have happened that we don't get to cover, but oh well, that's the world of wrestling, isn't it? It's a fast-moving business. So yeah, before we get started, Mike, thank you very much for joining me, buddy. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me again.
It's always a pleasure.
So looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, man. So am I. I am obviously you know me. I'm a huge NXT fan. Always had been for many years. 2017, 2018 was that was NXT's. That was when the brand was on fire, wasn't it? That's when it was really starting to be properly treated as a third brand. And obviously now, we went from developmental, very developmental and game show-esque into that third brand period, and now we're back to it being a developmental brand again, which, I'm all for. Obviously, the first thing that I want to talk about with you is the lead up to NXT 2.0. There was a hell of a lot of criticism. There were rumors flying around for sort of like 2, 3 or 4 weeks. Lots of talk about Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard coming in to oversee and to produce the new show and to write it, which obviously, with how bad Raw, not recently, but with how bad Raw has become over time, that obviously made a lot of people very wary after we'd come to know and love NXT, and obviously Vince having a particular taste in what he likes his wrestlers to look like, not necessarily a Johnny Gargano, not necessarily a Cameron Grimes. So there was a lot of worry going into it. When you first heard about what they were doing with NXT, what were your initial thoughts? Did you have that worry?
Actually, I thought that NXT could use a revamp. I thought I was enjoying it, but over the last maybe 6 months of this run, maybe it felt like it was just getting a little bit stale. A lot of the guys were leaving and obviously joining. Some guys from AEW, some guys went up to the main roster, some guys were released. It felt like it stopped being what it was supposed to originally be about, building stars for the main roster, which is where their money is. So I thought they needed to go back to some version of that. Obviously, not the NXT we saw initially with the game show and all that, and the elimination runs. A proper TV show like they're doing now, but with some fresh stars coming through. I think they've got the balance right so far. Yeah,
definitely. It's been a very promising first month, hasn't it? Like I said, there's been 5 episodes now. The first episode started on September the 14th. Nobody really knew properly what to expect. Obviously, we'd seen about a week before the very first episode, about a week before, we saw the new logo, we saw the new colours, we saw the is it Whale? Was it Wale?
Wale,
Wale. With the new song as well, which was obviously a huge departure from the heavy metal NXT that I've always sort of like identified with, because that's my kind of music, that's my kind of wrestling, my kind of music, my kind of theme, my kind of introduction. It always got me hyped. Hearing you had Rage for a while, it switched to Slipknot for a while as well, and then all of a sudden things went very, for lack of a better term, they went very Flow Rider. You know what I mean? They went very mainstream.
Yes.
So I had those doubts, I had those worries as well. New look, new colours, very much in tune with the main roster, more bright and more colourful and more appealing to kids, which obviously is what WWE ultimately are aiming for these days. The complete opposite from what we knew NXT to be. It was always very dark and grungy, almost. It felt very indie, even though it obviously wasn't indie because it was a part of WWE. So speaking of that theme and the new colours, I've got used to them very quickly. I that first episode, I was a little bit, yeah, it didn't really
Yeah,
fit every wrestler. Like generally speaking, it looked all right. I think having the screen that's constantly flashing, that's a little bit off-putting. I'm not the biggest fan of that.
yeah,
You get guys like Imperium with their nameplate being in bright multicolored paint splashes, and that looks a little bit weird when you're looking at sort of like evil foreign stereotype heels. That doesn't really blend very well. But for me, the overall feels very. It's a little bit WCW, like with the camera work. It's a very obviously a very
yeah.
small arena, but the camera work makes it feel really big. It doesn't feel like you're in the what's it called, the Capital Wrestling Center or the PC or anything like that. You feel like
No, it doesn't.
not quite an arena, but certainly something a little bit bigger. What how
Yeah,
how are you feeling about sort of like the theme and how the presentation of the show is? Have you got used to it?
I have. Yeah, I think the presentation of it's been really good. The focus on the new talent, primarily on the new talent. Um, yeah, it feels like a big show. I think they're using what they call a sound stage or now for it, which is apparently cheaper to produce, but it still gives it that feel, of being bigger than what it is. Yeah, I think it looks very good. Yeah,
Yeah, I think you'd be lying if you said you knew exactly what this NXT was going to be. It was definitely a surprise to everybody, like you say. When you take something that's been one way for such a long time, I know obviously NXT had the whole game show feel back at the very
yeah,
start because it was very much reality TV. But then, God, how long's it been? Probably 4, 5, 6 years, something like that, where it's all been black and gold. It's been the same commentators. It's been the same. You know what I mean? The same sort of attitude. That's what NXT had. It had attitude, and I think my worry was that they were going to rip all that attitude away. But what they've done really well, moving on to the next point, is I think I think the biggest worry for everybody was obviously what was going to happen to established talent. Johnny
yeah,
Gargano is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Absolutely live and breathe the guy. He's not been wrestling much recently, which has got me a little bit worried. But then
yeah,
obviously you've got guys like Cameron Grimes and Tommaso Ciampa and oh god, off the top of my head, Pete Dunne, guys like that. People who we thought were on the verge of leaving. Obviously, Pete Dunne signed a new deal since. Um, but they've blended those guys, the established guys, really well with the new guys. Obviously, you know, we've seen. I think it's pretty safe to say Bron Breakker is the guy. He's who they
yeah,
see as the guy. He's the one they really want to push. Von Wagner is another one that they really want to push for some reason. I'm not quite behind him yet. Bron Breakker, I really am.
yeah.
So the first question I want to ask you about this molding of old and new together is, what were your thoughts on Tommaso Ciampa becoming the first champion to lead NXT 2.0? Because you had guys in there like LA Knight, and now obviously I will, before anybody else tries to say it, LA Knight is older than Tommaso Ciampa, but he's
Yes.
newer as well. So he might have been a good idea to go with. You had Pete Dunne in there, who I believe is still only in sort of like his mid to late 20s. He's still a pretty young guy. For the whole feel of what they're going for, Pete Dunne would have been a great choice. So what did you make of Ciampa being the first champ?
It was a bit of a surprise to me, if I'm honest. I thought Pete Dunne would win. Look, going on his age, going on thinking, he's young, he could lead the brand. But I was happy with it. Ciampa, didn't get he had to vacate the title due to injury. So it's nice to see him have a run, albeit what I think is going to be a short run. But still, it's nice. And he's a great talent to put someone like Bron Breakker over if that's the way they're going to go. I don't think they could have picked anyone better than Ciampa to be maybe a transitional type champion.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you think Joe was genuinely injured, or was this all something to do with the storyline just to move it away from him? Because they must have had NXT 2.0 planned for quite a long time. So, obviously 50-50, hasn't it? Some people think it's a work, some people think it's a real injury.
I think it's real. Because if they've blended stars, Ciampa, O'Reilly, LA Knight, why not Joe? You know, do they have him come in, decross, and then just be like, oh, we're done with you now?
Yeah.
I mean, Joe would have been possibly even better to put Bron Breakker over. I mean, beating Samoa Joe, that would have been huge for Bron Breakker. So I don't see the advantage of that, but we'll see. I'm hoping we'll see him again, but I don't know if he fits the brand anymore. I don't think he needs to be on NXT. So I'm hoping maybe they call him up again.
Yeah, I think to be honest, he settles down into a backstage role permanently now. I know he's sort of like a talent tout, isn't he? And he's doing some stuff behind the scenes. Yeah. He's obviously getting on a bit. I would imagine he's probably the better part of. He's got to be about 40, surely.
Yeah, and he's got his injuries, and I think Joe's early 40s. Yeah,
and like you say, he doesn't really fit in there anymore. Even though you've still got the old hands like LA Knight, who I think is 36. Ciampa 34. Joe is probably in and around there. Even though he's a similar age, he just doesn't really feel like he fits. What did you make of what's his name, Von Wagner being put in the match in place of Kyle O'Reilly, like having somebody from the new breed instantly in that match?
Yeah, I liked it. They're going, obviously that first night, they went in hard on new talent, showcasing new talent. Bron Breakker beating LA Knight in the opener. Von Wagner going in the main event. A couple of other guys like Andre Chase and Joe Gacy, who will go on to come on to. Because I think it's been amazing. Von Wagner, not sold on him yet. The name doesn't do anything for me, and I don't want to go too big on names because people have been moaning about Bron Breakker's name, and I don't think it's that bad.
No,
but Von Wagner,
I don't.
Awful. Not as a talent. He's fine as a talent. I think he's got good potential, but the name isn't good.
No, they've not exactly set him up well for success, have they? It's the kind of name that's 1,000,000% going to change when he comes to the main roster. 1,000,000%. Apparently Vince has already earmarked him as a guy that he wants to be a main event talent in the future. So they'll do something there. But what did he do? Did they shorten it? You can't call him Von because that's weird. And can you just call him Wagner?
Yeah.
Vince isn't really one for change. That sounds stupid, but I know what I mean. Vince doesn't really change names, does he? He tends to either just shorten them or just take out a first name or take out a surname. He doesn't really very often give you a wildly different name. So I don't really know what they're going to do with Mr. Wagner there. But anyway, that was a nice sort of like segue in. Let's talk about all the new talent. We've said Bron Breakker, we've said Von Wagner. One of my favorite things that they've done just before this new revamped NXT 2.0 is that you could, obviously we didn't know this was coming. They knew it was coming, so they've slowly been building up guys like Carmelo Hayes, and you've got guys like Odyssey Jones. They came through at a really good time because they had, I don't know what it was, probably a few months before 2.0 started to establish themselves a little bit. So they're well known, they're well liked. They've managed to sort of like build their characters, but they still feel very fresh, very new. They feel like they really fit in with this. I was going to say Carmelo Hayes, as I say, he was known before what happened last night. That was a bit of a shock, becoming the new North American champion. There was a bit of confusion, a bit of criticism. It seemed like sort of like quite hot shot booked because I don't think anybody in the free world knew that the breakout tournament gave you a Money in the Bank-esque contract to cash in. I don't think that was the case last time around. I forget who won it last time, I'll be honest. But whoever it was... Oh, was it?
Jordan Miles. He became...
Miles. Shit. Yeah. He went for Cole, didn't he, when Cole was LA champion, yeah.
Deep end and retired from wrestling a few months later.
But it wasn't like a Money in the Bank-esque thing, was it? So, I don't know. That wasn't explained. I'm all for it. I really like Carmelo Hayes. I think he's very good. I assume he's going to feud with Santos Escobar for a while, and I am Legado del Fantasma's biggest fucking hype guy, so that is absolutely fine. The more we see of him, I'd like to see him moved into the main event scene now after a
Yeah.
little run against Carmelo, maybe. Some other guys that we got in there, Zion Quinn. I think it's Zion.
Um,
He looks like a fucking star. This kid,
he
he looks
does.
amazing. Love his intensity, though. He started off beating somebody as established as Oni Lorcan, so that was a pretty,
Yeah.
that was a pretty big deal straight out of the gates. Grayson Waller, unbelievable talent, unbelievable athleticism.
Him coming back as well, Grayson Waller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's really cool. Tony D'Angelo is another one that everybody is really getting behind, even though we've only seen him a couple of times. And let's move on and give you the floor and talk about Mr. Joe Gacy, because I know you're a huge fan.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure at first how this character was gonna sort of work, how it was gonna relate to fans, but it seems to be getting over pretty quickly. It's very clever.
He is. Joe Gacy is, I think, epitomizes what NXT 2.0 is all about. They've gone from, like you said, you feel a wrestling style with obviously characters and promos, but now moving towards character-driven gimmicks. Joe Gacy has one of the most current gimmicks in the industry, because this sort of thing is pop culture at the moment. It is. So people say it's WWE poking fun at wokeness, which it is, but that's fine, because that's what he's a heel. So people, they want you to hate him, and what he's doing really well is he reminds me. I've said this before. He reminds me of Daniel Bryan when Daniel Bryan was the planet's champion.
Yeah,
because everything that he's saying, you're like, what you're saying is right. You're saying all the right things, but you're such a dickhead.
Yeah.
The way he's delivering it, the arrogant, holier than thou way he's delivering it, is just what I think is setting him aside. And I think this week he named his fans his snowflakes, which I thought that was brilliant. So this gimmick, I mean, it is mainstream. This gimmick already, after 1 week, people saying he got cancelled, and then he wasn't cancelled. The guy's going to be, if this gimmick makes it to the main roster, he could be everywhere.
And I would just like to point out as well, the fact that people were saying he was cancelled, like, how well does that fit the character? Like, separate the two things and say he's cancelled. Like, that's literally what that character is. That's all that did was help him, because that's yet another one of the buzzwords that the woke crowd tend to use. I think I hate it when people say, or when people were saying that it was WWE poking fun at the woke crowd. Yeah, I'd say maybe 10% of it is that. 90% of it is them just being aware of what's going on in the world, giving us something that we can relate to, whether you are one of those people or whether you're a person who hates those kind of people. I'm more the latter, people who find offense where there is no offense to be found. People, for lack of a better term, Karens. You know what I mean? That's the kind of vibe that they're going for with Joe Gacy, and it's gonna get over. It's gonna continue to stay over. The thing with him is, we've had 5 shows of NXT 2.0 now. By the time this goes out, 6.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of new guys come through, lots of really cool talents. Bron Breakker is obviously, as I said a few times, the guy that they really want to push. But really, what's his character? He's intense, he's got balls, he's fiery, he's passion. He's his dad and his uncle, really, isn't he? He's literally just the next Steiner in line, Talk about all those names that we've said. Zion Quinn, does he have a character yet? No, he's intense. He's gonna go far. But Joe Gacy, so far, is the best character that we've seen. Maybe the only true character that we've seen. I know Tony D'Angelo has had a couple of things going on, and he's getting there as well. But
with a gimmick going with the university stuff and swearing a lot on that, which is ironic because the people saying this show was geared towards kids more, but
Yeah.
they're saying it's more edgy than it used to be. We're seeing them use Bron Breakker, obviously shit. Chase swearing. Obviously that was beat, but he did say fuck, and that was beat. But
yeah.
So but Joe Gacy is the best character without a doubt. I think we'll see more characters emerge as the show goes on. Bron Breakker won't be a gimmick though. I think Bron Breakker's like the guy. Yeah. They're John Cena.
Yeah, because other than Thugonomics, since the Doctor of Thugonomics ended, Cena hasn't really had a character outside of just being John Cena, has he? So that's a good point. Yeah, Bron Breakker is gonna be Bron Breakker. Von Wagner is probably just gonna be Von Wagner. The guys that we've seen with established characters and backstories and personalities, that's what they're going to take forward. But you don't always need a character until head of the table Bloodline Roman never had a character. You can't really count the Shield. That wasn't a character. That was just a group of rebels or whatever you want to say. Just to quickly touch on as well, one of my favorite things that they've done, and I was a bit worried about this, was how quickly, strongly, and well they've established Diamond Mine. Because when what's his name, Tyler Rust, when he departed the company, that was a big shock. That was a big surprise, especially as they've carried on pushing Diamond Mine. I assumed that was the end of them, but then obviously Roddy Strong got the cruiserweight title from Kushida. They brought the Creed brothers in.
Oh yeah,
it's good. It's good that they've kept that dominant faction, because obviously we've lost Hit Row up to SmackDown.
Yeah.
Obviously in recent months we've lost Undisputed Era. Half of them have left the fucking company. So you've only got there's Legado del Fantasma as well, obviously, but they were feuding with Hit Row, so maybe they'll slide into something with Diamond Mine. I don't know, but that's it's important that they've kept that. It's good to have sort of like an overriding group that's always there looming, especially with all these new talents, because eventually there's going to come a time where, you know, they're going to fall back into the trap that we always find them in. You can't push everybody all at once. You've brought in a lot of new characters, a lot of new faces, a lot of new personalities that you're trying to establish and get over. Chuck them together somehow, put them against Diamond Mine.
Yeah.
Nice and easy. Give that a few months to really help those new guys get over.
Definitely.
So yeah, in terms of influx of new talent, I'm really impressed with, I think, basically everybody so far. The only one I'm not too fussed about is Von Wagner. I think they're doing good things. Let's talk about the women. Let's talk about the ladies. You know me, and I think anybody listening to the show knows me. I have a monthly series just based on women's wrestling with Nadia Sapphire. I'm a huge advocate and huge proponent of women's wrestling. So NXT has obviously for many years now been the place to go to watch the best women in the world wrestle. They've always had the best roster, the deepest roster, regularly putting on matches as good, if not better, than the men. A few years ago, women's War Games was better than the men's War Games. It was the one with Rhea, Team Shayna and Team Rhea. So yeah, there's been a huge focus on women. The show was already pushing women to the forefront, but you know, I think pretty much every episode we've seen at least 2 or 3 women's matches, at least 2 or 3 women's segments. Women are being given time to develop their characters as well. The only thing that I'm not particularly enjoying at the minute, and I feel bad saying it because I was a really big fan over the last sort of like 6 or so months, Raquel Gonzalez is I've kind of, I don't know, every time I see her now I'm a little bit like just sort of lost interest in her a little bit. I don't think she is experienced enough, and certainly not experienced as champion enough to be challenged by women who are even less experienced than her. You know, she's not been in NXT for a particularly long time. She was obviously Dakota Kai's lackey, sidekick for the majority of her time there. Been solo for a few months since Dakota turned on her. I think she's been a little bit exposed. Obviously, she's in a big feud with Mandy at the minute, the main feud, Mandy Rose, which was again a little bit worrying because Well, what's Mandy really done since the Dolph Ziggler, Sonya Deville, Otis storyline? Not a lot. She's not had many chances to showcase what she can do in the ring. I remember at one point, I do remember thinking, oh, Mandy has definitely improved.
Yeah.
But when I first saw her come out to lay a challenge down to Raquel, I didn't think she'd improved that much. So I was a little bit concerned. What were your first thoughts when you saw Mandy? I mean, first of all, just go back to NXT in general. That was a bit of a shock. And then obviously she's teamed up with GG and JC. What are your thoughts on that whole faction, Toxic Attraction?
Yeah. So Mandy going back to NXT right around the time they were doing 2.0 was a big surprise to me because it sort of went against what they were doing. Bringing back talent down to NXT was feel like there was something they were going to do anymore. Maybe they're not now, but I think it's really worked. Toxic Attraction right now are getting over big time. Mandy Rose leading, your JC Jane, Gigi Dolan, two very good young talents. Mandy is thriving with those two. This is the best I've ever seen her look on any brand that she's been on.
And we're not just talking about how good she looks, because obviously she's always looked very good. I think she looks better as a brunette than she did as a blonde, but there's something about heel Mandy that I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I think this heel turn has really brought out something in Mandy.
And she's backed up very well by Gigi and JC, who've got a good intensity about them. They're good on the mic, both of them, especially Gigi. So I think Toxic Attraction. I don't know how long they're going to be in NXT, I'll be honest, because Mandy's already established as a main roster star, and they're getting over. So within a year, I think we could see all three of them on the main roster. But now,
possibly.
Seeing them in NXT, You mentioned Raquel as well. I think what's happened with Raquel, I'm a fan of Raquel, I still am, but her best time, I think, was her feud with Rhea Ripley.
Yes.
Raquel, the problem they had with her, I think, was when they turned Dakota, I think they should have gone the other way. Dakota should have been the face going into that match because Raquel at the moment isn't experienced enough to pull off big babyface champion. Yeah. It's much tougher to be a babyface, especially when you're new and at the top of the card, which she is. I think she should have stayed heel and been the big dominant heel champion for an eventual babyface to dethrone. That would have built another star, sending her off to the main roster because she's destined for the main roster, Raquel. Because you look at her,
Yeah, and as well, like leading on from that as well, the other big problem for me there is what's happened to Dakota Kai since. Dakota Kai was obviously the most talented out of the two, and one of the most talented on the entire roster. She'd been in NXT for Christ, it felt like since the very beginning. She'd been there for a good few years, feuded with basically everybody, other than being champion. What's left for her in NXT, and obviously they didn't pull the trigger on her being champion. I can't see her coming back for another feud against Raquel. So when was the draft? The draft was already like a couple of weeks ago now, wasn't it? Yeah. By the time this goes out, a couple of weeks ago, and she still doesn't seem to have a home. I don't know. You're 100% right about the Rhea Ripley feud. That was some of the best action, best wrestling that NXT put on during that period, those few months ago. No, it wasn't a few months ago, was it? What am I on about? It was ages ago. Feels like a few months ago.
It was early January. Was it January sort of time? Just before Rhea came up. She came up shortly after Raquel.
It feels like Rhea's been on the main roster for years. I think that's my confusion because obviously there was the Survivor Series stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We've seen her quite a lot.
Came up just before Mania, didn't she? Beat Asuka for the title.
And the other interesting thing you said in there was about Toxic Attraction maybe going back up to the main roster. I can see that happening. Very similar to what happened with Finn Balor. Obviously, he went back down to NXT, had an incredible year, probably the best of his entire WWE tenure on any brand, any show or whatever. Um, so yeah, I could see Mandy going back up to the main roster. My concern would be Gigi and JC if they stick together as a tag team. How long is it before they split them up on the main roster? The reason I say that, Shotzi and Tegan Knox have already been split up. They've only been on the main roster for a couple of months, and they've already been drafted to different shows. Like,
yeah, that's true. But they weren't really a team anyway, were they, in NXT? Whereas if
no,
Toxic come up, they'll be
I think they've maybe been together like once or twice in NXT, if at all. I can't even remember them being together in NXT.
more Ember and Shotzi, wasn't it?
Yes, for ages. Yeah, for ages.
But yeah, I don't know. But I think Toxic Attraction would be a genuine female faction, which they don't have currently. Not since the days of PCB and Team Bad, and
yeah. I was literally going to say that. Yeah, like it's been. When was the start of the women's evolution? It's got to be 5 years at least, 5-6 years since all of that. And you've had the Team Bad and all those women. So yeah, it's about time. About time we saw a good dominant women's faction. It would be nice if there was another one for them to go against.
Would. Yeah.
I love faction versus faction because you know what that leads to? War games.
Yeah.
So yeah. Staying on the women.
Yeah.
B-Fab versus Elektra was obviously, unfortunately, a thing that happened. Probably the worst thing I've seen in 2.0 since its inception. I know that's not saying much because it's only been 5 or 6 shows, but it was pretty bad. I like Elektra. I think she was a really good addition to the whole Legado del Fantasma thing. Big fan of Hit Row as well. I think it's probably good that they've moved to the main roster when they have. Again, though, it was very hot shot, wasn't it? Oh shit, we need to really quickly get the North American title off of Swerve. Yeah. And that's what we were saying earlier, that really strange booking. B-Fab in the middle of a feud with Elektra that was probably going to continue. All of a sudden, that's been stopped. What's she going to do on the main roster? Because where did they go? They went to SmackDown, didn't they? I don't want to see B-Fab versus Bianca versus Sasha. She's in no way, shape, or form ready.
She isn't. I think she's going to be protected for a while by just being like a valet for Hit Row guys. Swerve is going to do the majority of the wrestling. Top Dollar's quite green as a wrestler. Ashante's been wrestling for a while. I think that he's still very young, but he's very good. Yeah. But I see why they've called them up. I don't, people say they weren't ready. I also said they weren't ready, but they are different. Hit Row are very different. Their gimmick is very current. They could be, again, they could make big waves in the mainstream, especially with Top Dollar, AJ Francis, who's obviously got his own interests and outside of the company, and I think he played in the NFL. So I see why they did it. And if obviously how good Swerve is, if he does the majority of the ring stuff to begin with, I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, and I can see them probably going into something, maybe not straight away, but probably fairly early on with the Bloodline as well.
Yeah, that would be give some time. Yeah,
very good. I can't imagine Roman versus Swerve, but
Swerve Scott if he went into something with Reigns, because you imagine that Swerve would be the leader still.
Oh, yeah.
Which could potentially mean he gets a Universal title match. So that could be interesting.
Something new, isn't it? Yeah. That's what people are always crying out for, but I'm sure they'll find a way of complaining when it does happen. So, whatever. What do you make of, obviously we spoke about the balance in the men's division on NXT, how you've still got the old and the new. How about with the women? Because obviously Raquel still fairly green herself, but you've got some experience in there like Io Shirai, Frankie Monet, who only recently came over. Mandy is somewhat experienced. She's had that main roster experience. So do you think there's still a good balance there for things to move forward with?
I do, yeah. You've got some of the newer talent. You've got Io and Zoe, who are the women's tag team champions. Although, having said that, I don't think Io's long for that roster, to be honest. No. She's done. I feel like she's done all she can on NXT, and she's a genuine star wherever she goes. So, You've got Indy Hartwell with a new tag team partner because Candice is going to be out for a while. Yep. Obviously, having a baby. Yes, so you've got a good balance there of new and fresh talent coming through. Same with the men. So if they can keep that balance going, the show is just going to keep going from strength to strength, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about like segments and promos, because these, that's always the concern as well with a lot of new guys, a lot of new girls coming through, not had much TV experience. I know WWE put a lot of time and effort. They do things like promo class. Yeah. They're working with people like Triple H and Shawn Michaels, some of the best ever on the mic. So they've got the tools to succeed, but obviously being on TV is very, very different from being in the indies. I've only seen good things so far. Obviously, we've spoken about Joe Gacy at length. He's already got that side of things down. I think something I said that you agreed with is that he reminds me very much of Kevin Owens. Not just in look, not just in structure and build. Yeah. But there's that whole like to be your best friend one minute and your worst enemy the next. Just flip a switch. That's exactly what Kevin Owens is. He's believable in either role. I think Joe Gacy's going to really nicely slide into that sort of position on the roster where he can be used in basically anything. And I think he'll also be one of those guys who can take a loss.
Just about to say that he's already taken a loss to Ciampa. Yeah. Took a loss in his first week, I believe. It doesn't hurt him because his character is so good and his promos are so good. He is like Kevin Owens, a lot like Sami Zayn actually as well. Sami Zayn can lose week and it doesn't affect him at all because his character is just brilliant. And Joe Gacy's doing the same sort of thing. His facial expressions are very Kevin Owens. The psychotic smiles and that sort of thing. Like on the most recent NXT last night when Ciampa shoved him down after Harland made his debut and attacked Tommaso Ciampa after the match, appearing like it was with Joe Gacy. They've aligned. But Gacy played it off as if they didn't align, going over to try and check on Ciampa, maybe give him a hug, as he likes to do. When he was shoved down, the little wry smile that all along his face was like, this guy just gets it. He just gets it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I say. Like, you're like, oh, okay, he's smiling, so there must be something going on there. Yeah. But is there something going on there? You never know. Those are my favourite kind of characters, the ones who are like, you just don't know what they're going to do next. Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, guys like that who, like I said, could just on a switch, just completely flip their character. There's a few other guys in there. We've mentioned D'Angelo a few times. I think he's a really interesting one. Seems really confident talker as well. Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen. Now, I thought this was really good because it was only a 45-second clip. I know we've spoken about this like privately before. That's all you need. Is something really basic, something really simple. They had a bar fight, and now they're mates, and now they're tagging together. Basically, like the bar. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
A rivalry turned into something useful for both men, turned into an unlikely friendship.
Yep.
And like I say, that's what it only took 45 seconds. You didn't need anything long and convoluted. You didn't need promo after promo after promo. I'm already on board with these guys. They seem like the kind of I like that sort of like old school, just bare knuckles sort of wrestling, and that's what they seem to be for me. That's guys like FTR. You don't need anything more than that. The character can just be that they just want to fight, and that's absolutely fine by me. Duke Hudson, he seems like a really interesting character as well. Another guy that seems pretty confident.
Yeah,
they've been. Sorry, mate.
So he fought Grayson Waller, another new character, and he won. Last couple of weeks, they've been giving him a little bit of a character. Duke Hudson is the guy with the high IQ, very intelligent type of guy. So I think they're going to go in that direction with him. So it looks like he's been given that kind of a gimmick to work with. And I think he's got a lot of talent. Obviously, we've seen Duke Hudson before on the main roster when he was with Shane Thorne. MVP was their manager for a bit. I think, cannot remember what his name was. I think it was Brendan Vick.
Brandon Vick.
Yeah. But yeah, he's a guy that I think's got a lot of talent. Carmelo Hayes and his new partner Trick Williams. Trick seems to have talent on the microphone as well. He's got the gift of the gab. So there's a lot of guys there who can cut a very good promo, and women, like I said, with Gigi and JC Jane.
Yeah, Frankie.
Yeah, Frankie. It shows where WWE are really good with creating new talent. Like you said, the promo classes, the production. Yeah. No, other companies can't really pull that off with talent from the ground up like they do.
What do you make of Harland then? What do you think of his sudden change? I think people are like, oh, I can't believe they shaved his head, but I mean, he didn't look like a star before. Let's be honest. He looked like everybody said that he looks like Lesnar, and yeah, you can see that there are some similarities, especially in their build, and they've sort of got a very, I don't know, they both look very plain, but even so, Lesnar has still got a bit more about him. He still looks like he's got some sort of character.
Yeah.
Harland just seems very one-dimensional. I know we've literally just seen him. We've just seen him in the crowd, but it already feels, I don't want to jump the gun too much because they could surprise us, but it feels like he's going to be a bit of I don't know, like an early Snitsky sort of character, or like a Lars Sullivan, just going to be an unhinged, shaven-headed maniac. Like, it isn't new, but at least he's new and he's fresh. Yeah. I don't know. There's been a lot of hype around this guy. I've never seen anything of him in terms of competition. I think was he a footballer?
I think so. Yeah. I don't understand this guy, Harland or Parker Wardell, as they call him. The hype around him was very odd. He'd never been in the ring, and they will say he was the next Brock Lesnar. That's where social media sometimes can do someone like Harland no favors. Yeah. He's a new guy. He's just debuted, and people have all these expectations for him.
Building him up to fail.
That's not the character we want to go with, which is fine. He looks like he's going to align with Joe Gacy, which is a good spot for him, being with Joe Gacy, who is very talented, as we said, can carry him on the mic, and he can learn. Because I think he's, like you say, he's very new to this business. Joe Gacy isn't. I think Joe Gacy's got some experience elsewhere that he doesn't have, Harland. So he can learn from him, especially with his character work, with his promos. I think it's going to be good for him. But yeah, social media has done him no favors. I don't know where all this hype come from, because it's just come from nowhere, it appears.
It's. I think it's because as soon as people saw him, they were like, "That's a Vince McMahon guy."
Yeah.
So he's destined for greatness, but
it doesn't always work that way, does it? We've seen a lot of guys who.
Yeah, look at like your Heidenreichs and even the great Carly. I know he was champion, but look what he ended up being in the end. He was wearing fucking fairy dresses and tutus. He became a comedy character. He became a laughing stock.
Yeah, come and gone, and that didn't work out in the end. Ryback and
yeah,
there's a lot of guys that it just didn't work out for.
So one thing that's surprised me, and this is probably going to surprise people to hear, I'm sure it's going to surprise you as well, because you know how big of an NXT fan I am.
Yeah.
I've named all of those guys who've had amazing matches, 5-star classics, putting on clinics every time they go in the ring. Your Adam Coles, your Johnny Garganos, your Tommaso Ciampas.
Yeah.
I know things are very new. There's a lot of new guys who are getting used to a new style, a new way of doing things, wrestling on TV, maybe not having as long in ring as they would have if they were wrestling on the indies and doing a 20-minute match, which is now a 5-minute match on TV because of time constraints and stuff. But other than, and like I said, I'll forgive them for this because they are very, very new. Other than the tag team elimination match where MSK retained their titles, I've not been blown away by the actual in-ring wrestling. There's been a couple of good squashes, as you would expect. I'm sure when Harland gets in the ring eventually, he's going to squash people, and it'll be very impressive. Obviously, we saw Bron Breakker on his debut against LA Knight, pretty much a squash. LA Knight got some offense in, but it was still pretty much a squash.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not been blown away by. There's been some impressive performances, but there certainly haven't been any 5-star matches.
No.
Yeah, I know we haven't had a pay-per-view yet. I know Halloween Havoc's around the corner. Potentially War Games, I don't know. But NXT TV would still put on minimum like 4.5 star absolute fucking bangers basically every week. And there's not been any of that yet, has there?
No, not yet. I think there's a lot of new guys. They're not going to be as good in the ring as Gargano and Cole and Pete Dunne, O'Reilly, Ciampa, all those guys. Yeah,
Not yet, no.
No. This past week there are a couple of pretty good matches. Obviously, the main event was Swerve and Escobar, but obviously they're not new guys, so we know they're good. Gacy looked pretty good in his match with Ciampa. Obviously that's Ciampa, With the new guys, no, we haven't seen a lot of what they can do in ring yet. I think there's been a lot of squashes, short matches, just while they're introducing new talent. They've obviously tried to get a lot of new talent on quickly, which has worked. A lot of new characters have come on. I think Halloween Havoc around the corner, although it's a TV event, it's going to be like a pay-per-view. I think a lot of them, they're going to have longer matches to really show what they can do. And I think we're going to see Ciampa and Bron Breakker. Ciampa's going to carry Bron to a very good match, I think. Going to make Bron look like an absolute star that he is. So
does Bron win for you? Do you want him to? Do you think he should win this soon?
I think it was a bit soon, but I don't think he can lose, really.
No.
No. So I think he will win, and I'm okay with it. They could have waited a couple more months, maybe. Put him in like a sub-main event feud at first, but I guess they're going full steam ahead with the new director. Last night showed that they could have put the North American title on Escobar, and I thought they were going to, but they thought, no, let's put it on one of our new guys, So you're going to have the two top champions as Hayes and Bron Breakker. That's fresh, isn't it? That's new.
It's a big signal of intent, isn't it? Like, this is what we're doing. This is new. This is fresh. I think it's probably the right time to give to Bron. I'm quite happy with them doing it this quickly because, like you said, Carmelo Hayes got the title basically straight away. You've got to do that on Bron as well. If you're really going to get fully behind all these new guys and giving the future a chance and establishing these guys quickly enough for them to become main event stars on the main roster, and that's where the real balance is. That's what they've really got to. We've got a great balance of the men, the younger and the older. Great balance of the women, the younger and the older. You pull the trigger on these guys straight away and give them titles straight away. How long is it going to be before Vince is like, right, this guy's ready for the main roster? Yeah. Is he gonna jump the gun? Especially with him having more involvement now. He's obviously got eyes on people like Von Wagner, people like Bron Breakker, people like Harland. Are they gonna be main roster bound by the new year? That's my concern.
I hope not.
If Bron becomes champion after like 6 weeks, could he be on the main roster after 6 months? I think there's a very good chance of that. So I sort of agree with what you're saying. Maybe it could have waited a couple more months, maybe make him champion around Christmas, around the new year, and then give him a good run as champion. I don't know. I think as well, something that we might see is a lot of hot potatoing with the championships. With so many new talents, so many people that they want to establish, so many people that they want to give legitimacy to before those main roster call-ups, we could see a lot of very short title reigns.
Yeah, we could see Bron win the title, and then to establish a new heel, someone like Joe Gacy, for example, with Harland backing him up, could quickly come and take the title off of him in a couple of months. And then you have Bron on chase, going after who I think is probably going to be the top heel on the brand, Joe Gacy. I think those two, when they come together, are going to put a very good feud on.
And then inevitably Harland turns on Joe Gacy and Harland becomes champion.
Yeah.
It writes itself. It's that same old. You can bring as many new, young, fresh guys as you want, but WWE writing will always be WWE writing, and I ain't really got a problem with that. It's fine. It's life. That's the way things go in WWE. So what have been before we wrap up, before we round up, with what we want for the future of 2.0. What have so far? I know it's probably hard to pick out many other than Joe Gacy.
Yeah.
What have been your highlights so far? Your like early overall first impressions. Who have you really got your eye on most of all? Who do you think, other than the obvious Bron breakers, who do you think are going to be the real breakouts?
So we've touched on Toxic Attraction already, and Joe Gacy's that they're I'm looking at Carmelo Hayes. Before, obviously, he won the title last night. I saw big things for him. Odyssey Jones, big future for him.
Big fan of his.
Odyssey Jones. He's got a match next week with Andre Chase. They've got a little feud going that's just about to get started. Andre Chase is someone that I'm looking at as well. He's another gimmick type character, something different. I think he's going to be quite a funny character, which is, I don't think there's a lot of those on NXT, so something different for him as well. You said Zion Quinn. Got a good look about him, good talent. Grayson Waller is going to be a lot of fun as well. He did a little backstage skit with Grimes about finding, I think they were going on Tinder, trying to find Cameron Grimes for love. That's pretty funny. Cora Jade, she recently debuted. She's 19, I think she is. Someone for the future, definitely. And so many. Duke Hudson. The list goes on and on, but I'm interested to see who's going to come and stand out in the next few weeks to come. But at the moment, you've got the right guys coming at the top, I think, and Hayes and Bron, obviously. Bron Breakker, especially, what I haven't said about him yet, how the IWC, who turn on everyone, who hate the guy that's pushed as Vince's top guy. I've not seen anything negative about him other than his name. People don't like the name, fine, but
yeah,
he loves him, and that's so rare. It might not be the case in 6 months, but they've got a real star with this guy. So
it's refreshing to see. Like you say, it's refreshing to see everybody get behind somebody. A name is a name. It's not the end of the world. A name can be changed. A look can be changed. But yeah, no, I've got really big hopes for him. For anybody who, for some reason, still hasn't just used Google, the issue around the name, the reason they aren't using Steiner is because the family own the name. Obviously, it's their surname. They don't want to give it up. WWE would need to pay for it, and obviously WWE have got a lot of money. They have billions and billions and billions, but there's probably also a limit on how much they're happy to pay for a name.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to assume too much, but the Steiners don't seem like the most reasonable people in the world, especially Scott. So to give up that name, I mean, these guys could be asking for millions, and Vince is probably just like, fuck it, call him Bron Breakker. It's his name. Like, at the end of the day, does it really matter? We spent 2 decades getting behind a guy called The Rock. You know, one of the greatest of all time is The Undertaker. Does a name really matter? I've never disliked somebody because of their name. Like The Miz. The Miz is a crap name.
It is Dolph Ziggler. What kind of name?
Dolph Ziggler's a stupid name. Who cares?
I don't mind Bron Breakker. I think it's okay. I can see why as well they'd want to distance him from Steiner. It's problematic, you know. Yeah. Steiner, quite, especially Scott. I'm not saying Rick. I don't think Rick's very controversial at the moment outside of
Scott hates Triple H.
Yeah.
He hates Triple H. He's gone on record many times saying it, and Vince doesn't like Scott. There you go. It's really simple. They just don't want to be connected to each other.
And a few months when Rex Steiner, is the champion, says something, and then what happens? Steiner is the champion in NXT.
Yeah,
well, exactly. I can't trust him. Distance him from Steiner. I think it's the right move.
Another name that I can understand them changing, but I think Parker Boudreaux was a great name because obviously Boudreaux is a really cool surname, but it's obviously very similar to Scarlet Bordeaux.
Yep.
So I assume that's why they made that change there. I don't know. Like you say, we didn't want to put too much emphasis on names. Names don't matter. I could name you another 50 guys with ridiculous names. The Ultimate Warrior, for fuck's sake.
Yep.
You know, there's loads of them. There's hundreds. There's probably thousands of them. So the last thing I want to ask you, Mike, is obviously over the last 3 or 4 years, however long it's been, NXT has become synonymous with one particular type of double steel cage match, War Games.
Yep.
Always my highlight of the NXT calendar. It's always one of the best matches of the year. What happens this year? Because obviously War Games is meant to be next month because it's normally just before or the same weekend of Survivor Series. So we're literally 3 or 4 weeks away. We don't really have too much, for lack of a better term, madness going on in NXT at the minute. You know what I mean? There's no 3 weeks before War Games. Every year you're always like, there you go, it's going to be those guys. These two are mates. They're being attacked by 3 guys. Somebody's come out to help them. Where's William Regal when you need him? You know, you just know what you months and months before you know what's going to happen with War Games. But like you've got Toxic Attraction, you've got Io Shirai and Zoe Starks, and you've got Indy and her friend. So obviously there's not enough numbers there unless they put random women in there to help. I think Toxic Attraction haven't caused enough chaos yet to really need to settle a feud in War Games. You'd probably put Raquel with Io and Zoe. Maybe, I don't know, but what have you got on the men's side? Nothing. There's a lot of Diamond Mine. That's it.
You've got Ridge. I was going to say Ridge, but he's going, isn't he? He's going to SmackDown.
Yeah.
You had O'Reilly and Wagner beat Dunn and Rich Holland on NXT. Wagner pinned Rich Holland. Good for him. You got those two coming together. Pete Dunne's on another side. You got guys like LA Knight who can go in. Ron, Joe, Harland. They could definitely do it. They've got enough guys there, talent to do it. I think it will be. It's a big attraction match for them. I think they probably still will do it. It puts them in a big spotlight.
But whatever they do, the problem is whatever they do, they've got to do it now, haven't they? And we're already in the middle of sorting out Halloween Havoc. That's, what did we say, 2 weeks away? Yeah. So that's obviously the main focus. What date's Halloween Havoc? Is that still in October? Is it end of October?
Yeah, 2 weeks, 26th. Yeah, 26th. So 2 weeks from yesterday. Got one more week.
Maybe something happens at Halloween Havoc because then, like I say, you've all of a sudden only got 4 weeks left to build to the biggest match of the NXT calendar. It's just I don't know. I get a feeling maybe this year we won't see it, or it could be delayed. Maybe they could just push it forward. Maybe
move it towards Rumble time, perhaps. Yeah. Because they're doing more Rumble on Saturday again this year. Because they did, was it SummerSlam Saturday? And then they did the NXT on the Sunday after. They could do something similar.
Yeah.
With the Rumble, because the Rumble's on Saturday, so we could see something big out of NXT the following day. And that could be where War Games comes in, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm sure they'll find a way. It's WWE, isn't it? They're not going to let it go to waste if they can make money out of it. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, I think. I think we've talked pretty extensively about what's going on in NXT 2.0. Overall, over these first 5 or 6 weeks, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really impressed. I'm really surprised. I didn't think that it was going to be for me. I was really worried it'd be too much of a departure from something that I just so passionately loved, man. Old NXT was just the fucking best, especially like I said, 2017-18, Shayna dominating, Cole and Gargano and Ciampa putting on 5-star matches everywhere they looked. You know, I don't think I'll ever enjoy 2.0 as much as old school black and gold NXT. It just spoke to me more with that underground feel and that, you know, the heavy metal feel of it as well. if you could put a rank or a star meter, like our good old friend Big Dave, on these first 5 or 6 weeks, what would you give NXT 2.0 so far? I think I'd go for a 3.5. I think that's pretty reasonable.
I'd say 4. I think they've exceeded a lot of expectations. A lot of the characters, a lot of the talent has exceeded a lot of expectations. They've managed to create a big star already with Braun. Yeah, I think they've done very well so far.
Yeah, man. Absolutely exceeded expectations, like WWE always somehow manage to do. Guys, have you enjoyed NXT 2.0? If you haven't, please drop a comment on YouTube. Let me know what you're thinking, who you think your stars are going to be, if you like Bron Breakker, if you think the names are bullshit, or if you, like me and Mike, don't care about the names. Mike, my friend, thank you again for joining me. I will pay you soon for constantly being on this show. Just before you go, buddy, where can people find you on Twitter and on socials?
You find me on Twitter at nannyboy20. Yep, come give me a follow. Chat some more about NXT and all things wrestling.
Awesome, guys. You know where to find me, and it'll all be in the About section. Hit me up on the link tree. Find me on all the different audio platforms. Find me on YouTube. As I said at the start, drop a follow, drop a subscribe. Thank you so much for listening to us review the first month of NXT 2.0. Hopefully we'll do this again in a few months. Maybe let the show round out the rest of the year, come back to it in the new year and see, where we're at with the champions, where we're at with Toxic Attraction. See if any of our predictions have come true as well. I always like to do that. See if we were talking out of our asses or if we're geniuses. Who knows? It's probably going to be the first one, let's be honest. As I say, guys, thank you so much for joining. And until next time, take care.